So we're just going to have a discussion on mindfulness and yoga, because mindfulness is very much a practice of the moment, and yoga also is obviously very popular. And we'd like to explore, is yoga simply mindful movement, or is it mindful practice, and are there differences between mindfulness and the way we practice yoga? And Dave's had quite a lot of experience in Buddhist traditions as well as yoga, so we're going to have that discussion. And I'm going to start, Dave, by asking you, yoga and mindfulness, are they the same? Are there different nuances?
Okay, and I think we need to answer that question on a couple of levels. First thing to say is that from a kind of traditional perspective, certainly most Buddhists, and particularly the northern Buddhist traditions, the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, would consider themselves to be yogis.
Yep.
Okay, so what they do in their meditative traditions is yoga. So on one level, there is no difference.
Yep.
In fact, mindfulness is part of yoga practice. However, we need to qualify that, and when we're using that phrase now, for example, what we really mean is yoga as we are practicing it in this particular tradition, and we practice yoga of Krishnamacharya and Desikachar, as taught by Krishnamacharya and Desikachar, which is principally, not exclusively, but principally asana and pranayama based. So we are looking at the difference in those terms, understanding yoga to be the kind of asana and pranayama in the way that we practice it. And I think on one level you could easily say, well, we are seeking to cultivate mindfulness and awareness throughout our practice. You know, the way we practice is quite a meditative approach. And the way we use the breath encourages that very sort of mindful approach. But equally, I think that's too glib an answer. And I think I do.
Dig that a bit.
We have to dig that down a little bit more, and I think there are some differences in nuance, perhaps, and in flavour of the practice.
Okay, you were talking earlier about two strands of Buddhist teachings, or meditation, which is shamatha and vipassana.
Absolutely.
And you were talking about how vipassana, it's sometimes called vipassana. Vipassana is the Pali.
Yes.
Vipassana is the Sanskrit.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about vipassana.
We are going to talk about vipassana.
And people know of vipassana retreats, which they have 10-day retreats.
Well, they know them as vipassana.
They know them as vipassana.
The Pali term.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely.
And these are techniques where there's a kind of a mindfulness of body, mindfulness of breath. They're just focusing in on noticing, I suppose, a heightened sense of noticing.
Absolutely. I mean, we ought to be aware that let's just clear up the term mindfulness itself. Mindfulness is a term that's coined to translate the Sanskrit term smriti.
Mm-hmm.
And smriti conventionally is used as the term for memory. I mean, we understand it as the Sanskrit term for memory. So it's curious that how does memory become, mindfulness meditation practice? And the answer to that is that even within the Buddhist tradition, they talk about there are three possible domains of smriti, or mindfulness. One is a mindfulness that's past oriented,
right,
which is really like memory.
Yeah.
And in that, what happens is that if you think what that is you bring something into mind, into view.
Yes.
But from the past.
Yes.
And there's also future-oriented smriti, which is where you actually anticipate a future event. But actually,
so you're remembering the future.
Essentially.
Yeah.
But you bring it to mind. And essentially, that's what remembering is.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's the third domain of smriti, which is in the present, which obviously is much more relevant to the meditation practice. This is where you are simply bringing to mind
your current experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's about remembering to be present.
Exactly. In that context. So mindfulness is a translation of the term smriti, and smriti is an approach to meditation practice that falls within the domain of these two strands, which we mentioned, shamatha and vipassana. Shamatha literally means peacefulness. tranquil abiding.
It
So
has the same root as Shanti.
as Shanti, absolutely. So it's all us yoga people doing Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So it's the same root. And shamatha practice basically emphasises making the mind peaceful, and peaceful in the sense of there's stability of mind.
Mm-hmm.
So shamatha practice emphasises that quality of stability.
How is that quality of stability cultivated?
Generally through using an object of focus.
Okay.
So the goal of shamatha practice is seen as being samadhi, which is where you are completely involved and the mind is completely stable in a chosen direction.
And it's interesting because that's the model of the Yoga Sutra, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. And Peter actually talks about the model from the Yoga Sutra of that process of meditation as taking support on the object.
Exactly.
So we're bringing stability to
Yeah.
our minds by taking support on whatever it is that we're
Which
focusing
I think is a perfect definition of shamatha.
Taking support on an object.
Yeah, that's the means in which to achieve stability or tranquil abiding, if you
Okay.
like, in mind.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things about the the Buddhist teachings, and in a way, I think this is a way that Buddhists set themselves aside, perhaps from the other yoga traditions at the time, was the Buddha said that samadhi is not sufficient.
Mm.
It's like training the mind to become an instrument that's very clear and has a great ability to perceive very fine detail. But actually there's the question of what is it that you are seeking to realise, what is it that you're seeking to understand. And so that side of things is included within practices, or the dimension of practice, which is known as vipassana.
Okay.
Which kind of comes from a root in Sanskrit which means to see. So to see, well, we know vi as a prefix in a special way. In this context, vipassana is special seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But the context is to see clearly, so to sort of see things for what they are.
So the shamatha is to create the vehicle to be good,
Yeah.
and then the vipassana is to then take it in a direction that enables you to see more clearly.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you know, I mean, we've got to be careful because there are some practices that are much more shamatha than vipassana, and there are some practices which are generally classified as vipassana, but you have to be a little bit careful because the two are present in all practices to some degree. But mindfulness is much more connected with vipassana.
Right. And the mindfulness practices, as they're generally known around now, really are about noticing what's going on, not necessarily making judgments, but just noticing. Yeah. And there's the famous raisin. You take a raisin
Yes.
into your mouth, and then really, as if you've never experienced that before, what's its texture, what's its flavour, how does it change,
yes.
etc., etc. So that noticing is one tradition, and we do lots of doing. We breathe. We're teaching ujjayi. We're teaching directional breathing. We're releasing here and doing this. So that's not so much about just noticing. It's actually directing quite strongly. Yoga Sutra talks about nirodha, which is one translation is to direct.
Yes.
So can you say something about?
Yeah. Well, this is where I feel that there is a difference in nuance, or a difference in feel. I mean, I think what we do in terms of our doing, at its best, is a kind of non-doing, and moves towards the witnessing.
Okay.
I mean, I think that can happen as a natural process.
So doing which attempts to undo itself.
Exactly. We do quite a lot of work around that idea, but having said that, I think what we do lends itself more to the shamatha end of things, and I think there is perhaps a shift that could be made within the yoga practice to allow more space and time for literally the noticing, the pure witnessing. which I think is at the heart of mindfulness.
Yes.
So I think that is something that actually, there's some work to be done there to see how those two can integrate in some way. So having said that, the way we work, I think, is very mindful, and that in many ways, in some ways, at its best, it could be quite equivalent. I also think we could do some more work to make it more, to integrate the mindfulness aspect more.
Yeah, and
that's what we'll be exploring. That's our project, one of our projects for this year, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's talked about in the Yoga Sutras, in saying at least 3 of the sutras, of the movement from sort of effort or something into openness and space. And
yes.
We've got Abhyasa and Vairagya as a pair. Abhyasa comes first, practice comes first. That leads to an open space or a letting go. You've got the concept of sthira and sukha. Again, sthira is about that stability, which we talked about as shamatha, creating stability in order to create an open space.
Absolutely.
And then we have the movement from tapas to Ishvara pranidhana, which is that talked about in the beginning of chapter 2. Yeah.
I think the final thing to say in relationship to mindfulness is what's the objective of mindfulness. And we talked about it as being within the Vipassana approach, the special seeing things clearly as they are. And from the Buddhist point of view, then what you would see is that things are impermanent. All phenomena that you experience are impermanent. On some level, they're unsatisfactory, dukkha, and they're not self. They're not self. Anatma. Well, we have to qualify the anatma a little bit from the perspective of the Yoga Sutra, but essentially, none of those ideas are incompatible with the Yoga Sutra. In fact, those ideas, dukkha, anitya, which is impermanent, and anatma are in the Yoga Sutra 2.5 in a nutshell. Yeah. So I think actually, in a way, if we are basing our practice on the Yoga Sutra, the practice of mindfulness is a call or is an invitation to come back to really experience and to put into practice some of the ideas of the Yoga Sutra. So it's an invitation to come back to the heart
of yoga.
There
you go. Good. Great.
What do you think?
Yeah.